Hello and welcome to The Catch, a podcast about the seafood we eat and the impact it has on our world. I'm your host, Ruxandra Guidi. Recently, experts and government officials from across the globe gathered in Nice, France, for the United Nations' third Ocean Conference.
When it comes to protecting the world's vast oceans, the UN says it's a state of emergency, and threats are growing. Finding solutions is the goal of this week's UN Ocean Conference in Nice.
Several big announcements came out of the event, including the creation of a new marine protected area in Solomon Islands waters that will be the first ever indigenous-led ocean reserve. French Polynesia also announced a new marine protected area, which will be the world's largest ocean reserve. Here's President Moitai Brotherson sharing more about the proposal.
Why do we do it? We do it because we are part of the ocean and the ocean is part of us.
The Catch hosted a discussion on Pacific Islands fisheries. Why the Pacific Islands? That's where we're headed for our upcoming season of The Catch. In just a few weeks, I'll be venturing out to explore fisheries in Fiji and the Solomon Islands. Our event in Nice was moderated by acclaimed explorer and storyteller Philippe Cousteau, the grandson of the celebrated oceanographer Jacques Cousteau. We began with a special fireside chat with two global leaders, former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Ambassador Peter Thomson, the UN's Special Envoy for Oceans. This live podcast taping was in partnership with the Walton Family Foundation and Ocean Conservancy. Here's Philippe.
Ambassador Thomson, I'd like to start with you. We're taping live at UNOC, the United Nations Oceans Conference, where the international community is gathered once again to call for action, and bold action, which is a phrase we're hearing a lot over the last few days, and build momentum. So how are we doing that? How do we continue to build momentum and take more action from a policy and political perspective coming out of this conference?
Thanks very much. Before I answer that question, I just want you all to know what a thrill it is for me to sit next to John Kerry here, the great ocean champion. Thank you, John, for everything you do.
Thank you,
Our ocean conferences, the record stands. You know, the last time they did anything significant down in Antarctica, down in the Southern Ocean, was when John Kerry drove the Ross Sea MPA into existence. We still haven't done anything down there since then, working on it hard, but he is a man who has record stands, and thank you, John. But to answer your question, it's not so much what happens at a conference like this in terms of action, because it's what happens after the conference that matters. What happens at the conference is this amazing networking opportunity, amazing exchange of ideas, learning, etc., and also a build-up of pent-up energy and, of course, frustration at the way that the ocean's continuing to deteriorate. But what comes out of it is just a huge momentum. And I can say that because, I was Fiji, and where I'm from, and Sweden co-hosted the first UN Ocean Conference, and we saw what happened after that. I mean, prior to that, we were like, nobody was interested in ocean action, but other than John Kerry. And then after that, bam, away it went. When we got to Lisbon for the second one, there was so much more engagement from the world. After that, look what happened. We finalized the BB&J negotiations, all the rest. So that you get a momentum, you get a leap up from each one. And the fourth UN Ocean Conference is going to be in Korea in 3 years' time. And I know by the time we get there, we'll be in a very different world in relation to our relationship with the ocean than we were back in 2015 when we started out on SDG 14. So all in all, the process works. It's been worth having, and I encourage you all just to absorb as much as you can, then off you go. Because 2025 is going to be big. We're going to have the High Seas Treaty ratified by the end of the year. 100% sure about that in my mind. We're going to have the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement done. And hopefully we'll have that plastic treaty in place. I think it will be in place. The only doubtful thing will be about how robust it is. So how are we faring at this conference? I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Some momentum. So Secretary Kerry, I'm curious, as we talk about momentum and the importance of action, going forward, particularly in the changing landscape of the world. The stakes couldn't be higher as we continue to race towards 2 degrees. We've passed 1.5 degrees. And here we are in a world where we need more and more collaboration and multilateralism. And yet the United States is pulling back from multilateralism, is leaving the Paris Accords. Where does that leave the global movement for oceans, and what's the path forward?
Let me begin by paying equal tribute to Peter here, who has really been just a tireless pioneer, and he's been all over the world, meeting after meeting after meeting. He's been terrific envoy, terrific partner. And I agree with every word he said about the building blocks, so I'm not going to go backwards to that. That's a great foundation on which to begin to think about this. Quite simply, the administration in Washington, and particularly now, is not the only center of action of one kind or another in the world. Obviously, we don't agree with the kind that's coming out of there now. But what we tried to build after World War II, when we really pushed the United Nations and World Health Organization and Bretton Woods and finance structures, what we pushed was looking for a world where everybody had power. Everybody had an ability to make their voice heard. That's the whole theory of democracy and bringing people together in the UN and elsewhere to think about these things. It's only now in the last years that there's a resurgence of a kind of isolationism that America had pre-World War I. So I think the test now is to sort of rely on the subnational component of America that actually stood the test during the prior administration's life. When Trump came in, we were on a roll. We had a lot of things happening. He pulled out of Paris. We didn't have an IRA. We didn't have a lot of other things, but it hurt. I mean, it just wasn't great for the United States to pull out. But the very thing we wanted happened. Nations stood up. People led. I mean, you know, a lot of folks in other countries know how to lead. They know how to speak out for issues. They have passion, and they continue. And it's our loss. It's kind of stupid and self-destructive. And we're not at the table to help shape things, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, you look at in this second iteration of pulling out, China is laughing to the bank. I mean, they've cornered the market on all of the wind and solar. They're the world's largest producer of wind and solar. They are produced enough and deployed enough that they have actually deployed more than all of the rest of the world put together. And if you actually care about competition with China, why the hell are you pulling out of competing with them? And you surrender the field and go away and say, it's nonsense, when every scientist in the world will contradict that. So we're in our own sad, sorry place. But it doesn't mean the rest of the world isn't going to continue. And even after Donald Trump had been president for that one term, 75% of the new electricity that came online in the U.S. was from renewables. And it's 90% now. And the fact is that we have 37 governors, all of whom have renewable portfolio laws, and they've implemented those laws and will continue to. And over 1,000 mayors have joined together to continue to do what we did. We started a movement. Gavin Newsom, Governor Cuomo, myself stood up the day after Trump pulled out, and we announced, hey, we got a new movement here in America. It's called We're Still In. So President Trump pulled out, the American people stayed in. And I think you can look to see the American people push back here very hard. But let me, if I can, take a moment just to slide over a minute, because as we think about it, I mean, we're building blocks are here. And yeah, we got to have fisheries policies. And yes, we want to have no-take zones. And yes, we need the MPAs. And they're coming on like crazy. It's wonderful to see what the Polynesian president announced, you know, and 1.1 million square kilometers. And what the president of the Azores announced with 870,000. So these are the building blocks. But none of us should leave here without a recommitment to the fundamental principle. You want to save the ocean? Everybody here wants to save the ocean. What's the threat? Oh, it's the heating of the ocean. We're warming at record rate. What else is a problem? The acidification. Where's that come from? The burning of fossil fuel without capturing the emissions. Where's the bleaching come from to a large degree? Not exclusively. Burning fossil fuel without capturing emissions. Where's the sea level rise come from? Burning fossil fuel without capturing the emissions. So everything we want to do, folks, will not survive all these other efforts if we don't stop loading ourselves with pollution. Pollution in the ocean, pollution in the atmosphere. It's pollution. And we got to get people to get angry the way people were angry. I don't mean to cite the U.S. as the only. I mean, Europe's doing incredibly. There are a lot of places where people have taken risks, and they're doing really well. But there is a history here that in 1970, we all became involved in something called Earth Day, and we brought 21 million Americans out of their homes on the same day. And we didn't just stop there. We turned it into a political movement that actually targeted the 12 worst votes in the United States Congress, labeled them the Dirty Dozen, defeated 7 of the 12, and then even a non-environmental president called Richard Nixon said, oh, this is a voting issue. And they turned around and we passed the Clean Air Act, safe drinking water, marine mammal protection, coastal zone management, endangered species, and we created the Environmental Protection Agency of our country. It came from people at the grassroots saying, we're not going to let you be there if you're not going to do your job and put what we need in place. We have to fight for that at the same time as we fight. Every one of these things that are happening are essential. And thank God they're coming out of this conference in better, bigger, and more powerful form. But we've got to remember they will be eclipsed if there just aren't fish because the ocean's too warm. Because we killed them off by changing the chemistry of the ocean more than it's been changed in millions of years, and so forth. It's one big thing. You can't change one without the other. You can't win the climate fight without the oceans, and you can't win the ocean fight without the climate fight.
Yeah.
And now we have 3 minutes left, and ladies and gentlemen, there's no way to use that intelligently.
We do only have a few minutes.
Okay, in view of that, I'd just like to riff off what John just said there, because I agree 100%. Everything in the end for ocean action comes back to climate action. And, it's an easy thing to say, but it is the vital thing for our grandchildren, right? The way I put it is that we are creating a track towards the future. The track currently leads to a 3-degree world. That's what we're on at the moment. And that is a track where I'm sending my little ones, my little grandchildren, I'm sending them on a track to a world on fire. And that is obviously not a survival plan for our little ones. Where we have to create the track for is what was negotiated at the Paris Climate Agreement, which is a track towards 1.5. I know we've already gone past it. We've got to get back on track. Because at 1.5, it's not perfect, obviously, but it is a manageable world for the future generations. It's one which, with human innovation and multilateral cooperation around the globe, that we can manage, and they can experience the joy and wonder of living on this planet that has always been available to human beings. But that 3-degree track does not give them that privilege. What is a track? How do you build a track? It's actually really boring work. If you've ever built roads, and I have in rural development in Fiji, it's boring work. You got to dig drains, you got to lay down paving stones, and all this stuff that we're doing, like negotiating a high seas treaty, committee rooms late at night, or getting the WTO fisheries subsidies negotiated in Geneva, or getting the PSMA signed to stop illegal fishing. China signed, by the way, that didn't get much coverage. China has signed the PSMA. Stopping illegal. These are all paving stones. It's pretty boring bureaucratic stuff, but this is the tangible paving stones of that 1.5 track. We've got to have faith in reason, and we can give our little ones hope through progress, and building that track is what the progress is about.
Could I add something just quickly? It's important because I don't want everybody out here listening to feel that all we are is throwing a challenge in your lap and, it looks impossible. It's not. It's actually, I want you to leave here with a sense. The reason I intercede is if you take what we did in Glasgow, Paris just creates an invitation to do a plan, doesn't mandate anything. And then we went to Glasgow, and then we went to Sharm el-Sheikh, and then we went to Dubai, in which different promises were laid down, but they're not being kept. And the IEA has told us that if we did everything we promised to do at those COPs, we would be at 1.7 of warming. 1.7. Not the 2.5 we're headed to, or worse, 3.5 or 4. When I came into office with Joe Biden, we were heading to 4, 3.74, right? Everybody remembers that. Well, it's 2.5 now. What does that tell you? Things have made a difference. And guess what? If we do what's available, what we promised to do, which we have technology to do, solar is 90% cheaper than it was. It beats coal and fossil hands down. We can win. Folks, the only way to do this is to follow that track that we have set for ourselves. And you come out. Maybe you don't hit quite at 1 point, but you do a hell of a lot better than 2.5.
Indeed. Now, our time's up, but I do want to take a little bit of extra time because the subject of the catch for this season is your backyard, being from Fiji, Ambassador Thomson. So, of course, that region of the world is on the front lines of the climate crisis. What are the big issues that are facing it? Set the stage for us as we go into this season around the issues, particularly with fisheries.
Because of climate change, because of what's being forced onto the geophysics of the ocean as a result of that climate change, 3 of the 5 species of tuna in our region are going to leave. Now, why is that important? Because for the last 60 years, our regional organizations have sustainably managed tuna. We've got 60% of the world's tuna being sustainably managed by our regional organizations. But good management is one thing, but the fish have got their own thoughts, and they're just saying, hey, your waters are getting too hot, too acidic, we're leaving, and they're going off to Latin America. So that is really important when you think of a country like Tuvalu, where 90% of its foreign exchange comes from tuna revenues. You know, this is hurting in the pocket as well as hurting us environmentally, this climate change stuff. So that's just an example.
No, that's a terrific example. Thank you, Ambassador, and helps to set the stage. I will close with Secretary Kerry here. Oftentimes, the interests of fishers are presented as against the interests of conservationists and of ocean, protection, that there's a conflict there, but there isn't. How do those two interests align, and how can we help people understand?
Because if you approach them, I rewrote our fishing laws a couple of times with Ted Stevens from Alaska, a great fisherman himself. And we spent a lot of time, over a year, going out and meeting with the fishery councils, listening to the captains, figuring out what works, what do they need to make it work. And I find that most fishing folk, not the big industrial ships driven by land-based decisions that don't care a whit for anything except the money that comes from the product. They're not the ones I'm talking about. I'm talking about artisanal and real local community fishing people and folks. They know how to conserve. And we need to help them have a framework within which they can work. And let's not allow those folks to be pitted against us. They should be pitted against the people who are destroying this for everybody.
And bottom line, it's a proven fact now that marine protected areas, the first beneficiaries are fishermen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for taking time to join us today. Please, let's give Secretary Kerry and Ambassador Thomson a round of applause.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, a panel discussion will be looking at the issues facing the ocean and fisheries of the Pacific Islands. Welcome back. You're listening to a special edition of The Catch, taped in front of a live audience at this year's UN Ocean Conference in Nice, France. In the second part, our moderator Philippe Cousteau welcomed to the stage a panel consisting of Filimon Manoni, the Pacific Ocean Commissioner for the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, Ocean Conservancy's Dorsett, Vice President of Conservation, Kristin Kleisner from the Environmental Defense Fund, where she serves as their lead senior scientist and senior director of oceans, and Paolo Domondon, the Chief Program and Policy Officer for Global Fishing Watch. Take a listen.
Okay, so now we're going to turn to a bit of a broader discussion with our esteemed panelists to dig a little bit deeper into the issues facing the Pacific Islands. Now, of course, Secretary Kerry touched on it, but setting the stage here, it's critical to recognize and remember the stakes. When we talk about fisheries, it can often seem disconnected from our daily lives when you go to the store and you buy fish. But behind every one of those fish is someone's livelihood, is their family, they're feeding their children. And so the stakes are very real for a lot of these communities when they don't, as Ambassador Thomson said in Tuvalu, 90% of their foreign exchange economy is based on the tuna fishery. So this is very real, and it's very real consequences for people's lives and the ability to feed their children, something we can all relate to. So with that in mind, Filimon, I'd like to start with you. As the Pacific Ocean Commissioner, you are on the front lines of many of these issues. So I'm curious, in your view, what is the most pressing issue facing the health and sustainability of the Pacific Islands oceans?
How much time do I have? Oh, thank you for that. And of course, fish is important to Pacific. As you mentioned, accounts for 70-80% of national budgets for many, many countries in the Pacific. But the ocean to the Pacific is the number one priority. As if you notice here today at this conference, Pacific is not only mobilizing in numbers to come here and tell our story, but at the highest political level, because this is a priority for the Pacific. The health, the resilience, the vitality of the ocean is our number one priority. I mean, we have done our part. We have not been sitting idle at home and waiting for support to come. At the national level, if you look around the region, you see the Cook Islands install the largest multi-use marine protected area in the world. You see Palau establish a marine sanctuary. The sub-region of Micronesia has issued themselves a challenge for 30 by 30, both land and sea. I think recently expanded to 30-30. At the global level, we are moving together with the world. I mean, for issues such as the BB&J agreement, and we are very, very hopeful that the agreement will enter into force in a timely manner. I think at the moment there's 51 ratifications. We hope to jump over that 60th mark pretty soon. Because it's important to us. If we don't look after the high seas, if the high seas continues to be the wild, wild west, all the good work we do within our exclusive economic zone will amount to nothing at the end of the day. So for us, the management of areas beyond national jurisdiction, BB&J, biological diversity, is also important to us, because remember that the ocean is one single ecological system. And what you do here impacts what happens over there, and what they do over there impacts what we do. So one of the stories that I always tell, because I think it's important, all the main tuna stocks managed in the Pacific are in the green. And that's a fact.
And in the green, you mean?
Healthy stocks. 50 to 60% of tuna supply, the global tuna supply, comes from the WCPO. So we are doing work that benefits communities across the globe. So when we ask for partnerships, I mean, what's the rocket science? Who are the beneficiaries of this good work that we do in the Pacific at the end of the day? Is it just the Pacific Islanders that are benefiting from this? We are in the process disproportionately shouldering the management burden for healthy tuna stocks for communities across the globe. So I think if we look at this picture very carefully and think about what we need to do, because we can't do the work alone, and I think there should be some understanding about why all of us together as a global village should support the effort of all of those, including the Pacific, that are proactive in taking the necessary steps, joining the various different legal frameworks, participating in multilateral agreements, and walking the walk together with the rest of the globe on managing and ensuring the sustainability, the bountifulness, and the vitality of the ocean is our common heritage.
Filimon, thank you. You speak with terrific passion, and I want to build on your comments with Chris. As Filimon said, the impacts in the Pacific Ocean affect the world. Can we step back, though, a little bit and talk about the Pacific region as a whole, and what are the big challenges facing that region from a fisheries perspective?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. I want to first start with climate change and changing ocean conditions in the region. So the Pacific region, the South Pacific region, is historically very stable when it comes to temperature band and ocean conditions. And then you have so many people that are dependent upon the fisheries along the coastline as well as offshore with tuna fisheries. Because of this, it's particularly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. So what are those impacts? One is we expect the ocean's going to get warmer. It's going to get more acidic. It's going to really impact primary productivity in terms of it. So the last one I was going to mention was the frequency and intensity of storms. That's going to affect community infrastructure. And then the increases in temperature as well as ocean acidification are going to affect the base of the food chain, which is going to have ripple effects up to the species that people depend upon, like nearshore reef-dependent species or tuna fisheries. If you look at some of the projections for the region, they're quite alarming. Things ranging from current carbon budgets, we're looking at up to 50% reductions in current catch levels in the region, or some alarming statistics of 60 to 80% of biodiversity loss in particular areas. So this is a huge issue for the region that should be top of the list in terms of addressing.
Well, to put that in context, if you think of 50% reduction for a country where 80 to 90% of their economy is based, that's catastrophic.
Absolutely. And the other part of this is the fish are going to move, right? So tuna are expected to move from the west to the east and also north. So you're like, okay, well, what's the big deal? The fishers can just follow the fish, right? Well, the way we manage fisheries is we draw lines on a map, right? We have political jurisdictions with certain management measures. So number one is you may not have the ability to go and chase those fish to catch them, but also you start to the fish move into another management jurisdiction. So you may kind of be left out in the cold, if you will. It's going to create tremendous user conflicts and strains on management systems if we don't develop systems that are going to allow us to be proactive as opposed to reactive, because we know these changes are coming.
So, Kristin, I'm curious then, with that context, what does this look like on the ground in terms of food systems, fisheries, and how they can prosper? I mean, this is pretty dire. What does that look like? How do we manage these systems so that it doesn't all come crashing down?
So you might ask, if it's not tuna that's really feeding people in the Pacific region, what is? That's where I'd like to turn for a second away from tuna and to small-scale fisheries, because it really is an interconnected story. And it wasn't until the Illuminating Hidden Harvest report that came out in 2023. It resulted from over a decade of research, and then combine that with work of groups like Too Big to Ignore, the Sea Around Us Project, and others. We didn't have a good handle on the volume and the importance of fish from small-scale fisheries, both for livelihoods, but also for, and I think critically, for nutrition. So for this reason, I think policymakers haven't known how do you integrate fisheries into food policy dialogues and the funding around that. That was a real challenge. They were completely left out almost.
So not just about their livelihoods, but literally about the nutrition and the food for their families again.
Yeah. So it's bringing a different value lens to fisheries, but a very, very important one. When you think about the critical micronutrients that aquatic foods or blue foods provides, particularly for women, children, but for all of us, they're incredibly important in particular regions like the Pacific Island countries. So it's not just its protein, it's also these micronutrients. And so, to ensure that blue foods continue to make a significant contribution to global food systems, I think, governments need to be incorporating them in food-related decision-making and policy-making. And that has been changing. It's not all doom and gloom. That was the story, but it's changing. Many have been working to center blue foods in these policy dialogues. One of the landmarks was the Blue Food Assessment that I think it went from 2021 to 2023, and that was an international joint initiative. Over 100 scientists from more than 25 institutions around the world, and it was led by Stockholm Resilience Center, the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions, and Eat Lancet. We were involved in that, and it highlighted that over 2/3 of blue foods destined for human consumption are produced by small-scale fisheries and aquaculture, and women are a huge contributor to these figures, and that aquatic foods are, they're also a lower carbon footprint source of protein and a critical source of micronutrients, as I mentioned before. So then fast forward, we now have the Aquatic Blue Foods Coalition that originated from the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021. It was an action group that their focus was to fulfill the potential of SDG 14. And so we have been working within the coalition to really build global support for action that's really needed. And it helps to set the tone for what governments are going to pay attention to and the policies they enact in the Pacific Islands and around the world. And so some of the flagship work of the coalition has been to ensure that aquatic foods or blue foods feature prominently within countries' nationally determined contributions and their national adaptation plans. There's reports out on that. And it's helping to provide decision makers with science-based policy and technical guidance to make this happen. And that's really critical. I can't underscore that enough. And then we also have been spearheading other work on the science side to say, okay, we have global databases of production, we have global databases of now nutrition from aquatic foods, but the key missing element was trade. And when you link these data sets together, as they've been now recently done, you have the potential to answer key questions about who has access and availability. Where is nutrition flowing in and out? Rather than looking at trade flows, we're looking at nutritional flows. And that is really critical when you're talking to a minister of food. It brings something to the table that they're looking at rather than the dollar value. And so I think the key question that we really need to ask is how can we integrate fisheries into multiple government priorities and ministries, and what are the opportunities to get nutritious food from blue foods to the most vulnerable? And looking at, individually particular countries in the Pacific Islands, how much is being exported versus imported, and where is that nutrition going? So that helps to make, potentially better decisions about who's accessing those fisheries, especially as these stocks are shifting, not just tuna, but other species as well.
Well, thank you for that perspective, Kristin. It again reminds us and grounds us in the fact that when we talk about fisheries, we're not just talking about economics. We're talking about fundamental rights of people to have access to healthy, nutritious food. So, Paolo, I'd like to go to you next. Certainly one of the big challenges, these are vast areas of the ocean, very difficult to monitor, daunting indeed, and there are a lot of bad actors that act with impunity. So Global Fishing Watch has an innovative approach to safeguarding our oceans, and that's a critical step to achieving any kind of hope for the future. Tell me a little more about what you're doing.
Absolutely. So they say that 1 out of 5 fish caught are coming from illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing. In the Pacific alone, they say that they're losing about $333 million annually because of IUUF around tuna. This is no longer about a question of food security, livelihoods, economies. This is about a question of equity. We at Global Fishing Watch, we believe in the very basic premise that we cannot manage what we cannot measure, and we cannot fix what we cannot see. So transparency and technology is allowing us to do so. For more than close to a decade now, we have been using satellite imagery, data, radar, light, GPS, and combine all these information to be able to inform governments, civil society on what's happening in the waters. But technology could only do so much. We need the principle of transparency to come in. We need political will and backing to support this advocacy around transparency. What we mean about transparency is about making ocean information, vessel information, publicly shared and as open and accessible to as many stakeholders as we can. Transparency is a very basic principle of good governance across all various levels, across all various sectors, not just in fisheries, not just in environment. It fosters accountability, it increases participation in decision-making, and if done well, It could also contribute to equity in terms of access to data, but also access to resources themselves. And we have been seeing this wave and momentum around transparency. At the first UNOC when I joined, which was hosted by Fiji at New York, nobody, probably a handful of people, was talking about transparency. At this UNOC3 and of all the global climate conversations, biological diversity conversations, people are talking about transparency and how we could hold stakeholders accountable for their actions. Last December, the UN General Assembly issued a resolution, a sustainable fisheries resolution, talking about transparency, calling for member states, for regional bodies to actively share out vessel information, including universal beneficial ownership. So I want to say, I come from the Philippines. I stand behind and beside and work with the Pacific to really amplify this work. This is such an important cause. I've been reflecting while walking in the hot streets of Nice. How equity is such an important topic, right? We talk about at Global Fishing Watch this concept of radical transparency. Let's share out everything. This is what's harming our oceans. We don't know what's happening. People talk about radical collaboration. Let's make it forward. But people have started to talk about radical optimism. People are tired at these conferences. I've been doing this for decades now, right? At the climate conference, we all walk these streets. We're doing logistical challenges. I'm speaking to the choir, but we shouldn't lose hope. My first development experience in the Philippines was going to a fisherfolk community and a small child asking me, "What will my father do if you establish this protected area?" And I absolutely did not know what to say. But evidence, science showed that oceans will rebound if we give them the time and the space. And as Kristin has mentioned, we absolutely need to give these data, these information to stakeholders like small-scale fishers, local communities, and indigenous peoples.
So when we talk about local communities, I'd like to actually go back to you, Kristin, and talk a little. What are we getting right? What are Pacific Island nations getting right in terms of managing these fisheries, and what could be improved upon?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of thinking about putting different value lenses to fisheries. That really helps to make the case in different settings and with different policymakers, and that's important. On the ground, I mean, I think we're starting to make strides too in managing and actually data collection. There's a lot of interest in the Pacific Islands in electronic monitoring and data collection. So we've been working on that, which is, I think, these are all hand-in-hand issues. You need to know what's out there. You need to improve the management. You need to understand what's going on. The other thing I would say is an economic argument about tuna and how Pacific Islanders can work together because they have a valuable commodity here. And I think, bringing both the value and the nutritional angle to the picture gives them a bargaining chip, which is helpful. These tuna stocks tend to be moving and shifting out of EEZ waters and into high seas. And so that comes with an additional set of challenges. So I second, the need for BB&J protection because that helps to strengthen the cause for who accesses these fish.
Chris, I'm curious, when we talk about fisheries, there's a lot of talk about tuna. I'd like to bring it a little bit more near shore because particularly for local communities and nutrition, coral reefs and nearshore fisheries also provide a great deal of important sources of food. They're suffering as well. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that coral reefs are particularly susceptible to changing ocean conditions due to climate change, and there are a number of species that communities depend upon that need these coral reefs for their survival. So they're absolutely critical and very much in jeopardy in terms of our current trajectory. I will say I painted a pretty bleak picture when I started, but I'm a hopeful person, and I've worked with fishers for quite some time, and ingenuity is a word that comes to mind. And we also have a lot of tools in the toolbox that have been developed that will allow us to manage in these changing ocean conditions. So my colleagues at Ocean Conservancy recently published a paper looking at 60 near-term actions we can start to take right now that can really help us. Things like planning for shifting stocks, planning for or looking at ecosystem indicators as opposed to just, okay, what's going on with this particular stock of fish. So there are a lot of tools in the toolbox that give me a lot of hope that we can adapt and recover based on actions that my colleagues have talked about here in terms of ocean protection.
Well, that's good to hear some good news. It is all a little bleak, right? Sometimes, but certainly there are a lot of tools that we have at our disposal, from MPAs and better management and et cetera. So we've only got a few minutes left. I would like to go back to Filimon here real quick and go back again. Global, certainly the U.S. and China. A lot of superpower competition in the region around ports and investment. And how do you balance that delicate balance with the needs and helping the local environment, the local communities that rely on these fisheries for their livelihoods?
Certainly, I think the past 5 years, I think, even 3 years ago, Pacific was seeing very, very high-level visits from other powers to the region to do exactly that. But also filtering into the fisheries sector. We have agreements, enforcement agreements with some countries that are also in jeopardy, I think. But we've seen recent executive orders that concern us in the region about some of the activities that might happen. Whilst we in the region have some divergences around the question of deep sea mining, but the thing is we are all working under the framework of the Law of the Sea Convention. But what we are hearing concerns us because possibly we could see something happen outside of the legal framework of the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention, the recent executive orders. No, but we like to say we are friends to all, enemies to none. All of us in the Pacific have diplomatic ties to everyone in the region, and we work together with our partners. And sometimes, in reality, we leverage off these tensions, a little bit to our benefits. Yes.
So we're going to do something. We're going to do a quick rapid fire because I do want to end on hope. I think we all need a dose of hope. So I'm going to run around here in 30 seconds or less, if possible. I'd love to Paolo, start with you. As you think about technology and innovation, what gives you hope with respect to ways that we can utilize innovation to better manage these systems?
The technology is in there. We can be as innovative as we can. But if it doesn't come up with political backing, will by constituents, it is nothing. We need data to be not only accessible, reliable, but also actionable. We are making a dent. We are making a significant dent around all the different regions, and specific in the Pacific.
Terrific. Chris, what gives you hope specifically in the Pacific Island regions? And in terms of the kind of multilateral organizations, NGOs that are operating there, that are gathered here at UNOC, what can be done better?
Yeah, I mean, if you look around the conference, right, there's a lot of concerned individuals, management entities, scientists, et cetera. So we have a lot of capacity that we can put on this issue, and it's an all hands on deck moment, right? And so there is a lot of support, and we just need to make sure there's some political will to implement some of the tools that I talked about. We have the tools, we have technology in terms of being able to better monitor fisheries, ocean conditions, et cetera. So the table is set for us to take this and really move towards a bright future for the region.
Kristin, I'm curious to hear from you. How can we provide as much sustainable food choice for local communities? What's giving you hope in your work?
So I'm going to give a shout out to Global Island Partnership. They have GLISPA. They've been here at the event all week. Some of them were here last week. I'm on a WhatsApp group with them, and honestly, they are everywhere. I can't keep up. It's amazing. I mean, if I could magic myself to different places, maybe, but I mean, they're everywhere, and they're very positive. And it is a partnership of island nations around the world, so working together. And I think that's how we affect change. And this is a topic, the nutrition and blue foods topic that I spoke about is something that is on their radar, and that we work together with them. And so I would say I'm hopeful because there is so many passionate people here and dedicated people working on this topic.
And Filimon, in our moments left here, the Pacific Island nations have done a very good job of coming together, banding together to work together. As you look forward, let's fast forward a little bit to the next UN Ocean Conference. What are your goals? What do you hope will be on the agenda and can be achieved at the next conference?
Well, one of the things that Pacific is here for is to share voluntary commitments with friends and partners, strengthen existing partnerships, build new partnerships, and we hope that by the next UNOC that we will be talking about the successes of the last 3 years leading up to UNOC3. So hopefully we will be talking about those progress and successes of the last 3 years at the next UNOC.
The kind of action everyone's calling for, progress. Well, Filimon, thank you very much. I want to remind everybody, I think when it comes down to this, when we think about fisheries going into the next season, to remember that it's not just about economics, it's about human health, it's about equity, it's about opportunity, and those are all things that we all share the desire for. So thank you all. Thank you to our panelists for your insight, for your vision, for your hope, for your hard work, and I do indeed hope, as Filimon said, that in 3 years we come together and are celebrating action and successes going forward. We have the tools, we just need the will. Thank you, everybody.
Our thanks go to Philippe Cousteau for moderating this discussion, as well as all our participants. We first heard from Ambassador Peter Thomson and Secretary John Kerry, and then our panel included Dr. Filimon Manoni, Chris Dorsett, Dr. Kristin Kleisner, and Paolo Domondon. And a final thank you to our partners, the Walton Family Foundation and Ocean Conservancy. Our production team on the ground in Nice was Rosie Julin and Katie Blake Birch-Hudson. Rob Sachs is our series editor, and I'm Ruxandra Guidi. Stay tuned for Season 6 of The Catch, which will feature on-the-ground reporting from Fiji and the Solomon Islands, coming out later this summer.